All right, guys, we're going to get right into this clip, man. We have Andrew Tate and PBD. Andrew Tate, as we know, has touched down in America, specifically Florida. And his first interview, he conducted it with Patrick Bet-David. So he asks him an interesting question about his comments he made about the UK immigration crisis, quote unquote. That there's this ongoing huge invasion of Muslims coming into the UK when, you know, you look at the statistics, which he doesn't outline in this entire interview, you know, and it's a complete lie. We know most of these immigrants are coming from India, right? But it's interesting how they lump everything together. But let's get into this clip here. Andrew Tate, PBD. Let's break it down.
Years old when this happened to me. So you look at stats because I'm a data guy. I think you're also a data guy.
100%.
And I watched you go through it to see how you were going to maneuver around this. I was watching you very closely. I think you and I even exchanged a couple messages one time privately, you and I. I look at stats. 2023, the top name, the number one name in UK, London, is Mohammed.
Correct.
Okay. That wasn't the case when you grew up. That was not the case.
It's true.
When you look at stats, 27% of prisoners in London jail are Muslims.
Yep.
Where the population's only 6%.
That's right.
You hear the arguments about Sharia law, what they're saying. You hear your fellow who you've spoken to before, you guys have collaborated before, Tommy Robinson. He makes his arguments on what's going on with what do you call it? With
grooming
UK.
gangs.
Yeah. And then I look at some of the tweets. Here's a couple of the tweets that you had for people reacting to you because you were going strong to what was going on in UK. And you said, if you don't believe in the way the system that UK has, get out. I don't care who you are.
Correct.
You were very clear about it.
Correct.
You were very thorough about it.
Correct.
The response came back to you from the Muslim community, and it wasn't pretty. They were attacking you, right?
Yep.
And one of your response here that I have on the tweet, it says, Islam hate comes from Muslims who think they have to defend the disgusting actions that other Muslims commit instead of admitting that a religion can be perfect and people are not.
Yep.
Muslim must condemn the disgusting child rape openly and verbally, or the entire religion will be done. And then you respond back, Muslims who refuse to understand the crime Islamophobia instead of addressing the serious issue is only going to garner reassessment. These grooming gangs would not be tolerated in an Islamic country. It's time for Muslims to stand up against all. And then there's more of these that I can read.
Yep.
Okay. And even to go back on what happened when the comments they made about Jesus Christ, you remember that as a Muslim, you said, I will never forget these scumbags for disgracing Jesus Christ,
That's
right? So you've done both sides. But specifically to UK, a once great nation based on what you're saying.
Yep.
A once 200 years ago, the strongest men, what they produced, who they defended.
Yep.
They were not afraid of going up against the scariest people that everybody feared. They stood up and said, you're not going to do it here.
Yep.
We've seen Dunkirk. We've seen these movies. We've seen these histories. A lot of us got it from movies. Some of us got it from school. How much has your opinion changed since now you've been a Muslim now for what, 2 years? I want to say 2 years, 2.5 years, something like that. How much do you link that to the issues that UK is facing?
So the UK does have a problem where a lot of the culture is being eroded, and it's being eroded by an Islamic immigration. And this is going to make Muslims mad when I say it, but I understand why the native Brits feel threatened by that and are unhappy with that. When you talk about crime statistics, it's difficult because you can do the same thing with black people in the United States. But black people are a part of the United States. It's seen as racist to say that there are a lower percentage of the population, but they commit more of the crime. But you can do the same with black people in the United States. But black people live here, and they're always going to live here. I like to be ultra realistic about all things. And I like the idea of Britain retaining its culture and feeling like England. A lot of the stabbing that happens in the UK isn't from Muslims particularly. It's actually from Christians from Africa. A lot of it's third worlders. A lot of it's black youths inside of London who do most of the stabbing, the majority of it. So I think we have a huge disconnect here that we have to discuss. And the disconnect is third world versus first world and attaching Islam to the third world. And in some cases that is true, but there are first world Islamic nations which are much safer than any Western nation. So you have a lot of third world Christians which are coming in, committing heinous crimes. The Southport killer, he was from Rwanda, I believe he's a Christian family, and he killed 4 or 5 little girls, stabbed them to death recently. That's what caused all the riots.
Rudy Kabena, the guy from the Taylor Swift concert.
Correct.
But his father was from Rwanda, but his father had some crazy stuff. He had Al-Qaeda training.
That's right. But there's a whole bunch of Christians who are people coming from the third world which are committing crimes as well. I'll be honest.
By the way, that guy that committed that stabbing attack, he was automatically labeled a Muslim. They had to, some people in the community had to do like a full on like research and expose, you know, that he wasn't, because they were running with that narrative just to show you how how they get down with the media out there.
With you, it's actually interesting when we attach Islam to these things. If you go to the UAE or Qatar or Bahrain, these countries have extremely strict immigration policies. They're extremely strict about Islamization and extremism and radicalization. And these countries are some of the most beautiful countries in the world to live in, and they're extremely safe. So I think the problem that we have with Europe and the UK specifically was actually summed up by somebody who knows the problem better than I, and it was the UAE foreign minister. Did you ever see what he said? Yes. The UAE foreign minister. Find his video where he talks about the Islamization of Western nations. And he's saying that you're allowing extremism to foster in your countries because you think you know Islam better than we do. And we don't allow these ideologies in our own Islamic nations. And you're allowing them in the West. And you think you...
It is right there.
Let's play this video.
There will come a day that we will see far more radical extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe because of the lack of decision-making, trying to be politically correct, or assuming that they know the Middle East and they know Islam and they know the others far better than we do. And I'm sorry, but that's pure ignorance. There will come a day.
What was interesting about that interview, if you saw the very beginning of the clip, the whole interview was actually in Arabic. And he was going to say that, and he goes, no, I'm actually going to say this in English.
Yeah, that's right.
And she's like, no, it's okay, we'll translate. He goes, no, I want to say this in English.
Yeah, so...
what do you think about that message?
Well, you could say he's not a real Muslim. I guess that's what the Muslims of the Great Britain would do, because they said that to me when I said that any Muslim who is not outraged by the crimes committed by Muslims is part of the problem. And this is the identity politics problem, right? We had this with blacks and George Floyd, et cetera, and all these things, and BLM. If a black person commits crime, then black people should stand up and say, I don't care if he's black, he committed a crime. Yep. But when you have people who rally around somebody purely because of their religion or the color of the skin, irregardless of their actions, that's how you foster hate. If you want to give racists what they want, and I'm part black, part white, if you want to make white people hate black people, all that takes is for black people to defend a black person who breaks the law. Now they're like, well, all you black people are a problem because this guy was a criminal and you're sticking up for him. So what I was saying is that the Muslims who complain that Islam is hated in the West, they're making it worse by sticking up for grooming gangs and serial murderers. I don't care what race or religion you are. If you're killing little girls, you're a scumbag. And in an Islamic nation, you would face the death penalty. So I don't care if it doesn't make me a real Muslim for that. I don't care. But I will be honest. I'll be very honest. What he said is extremely interesting. Because when I say these things online, I get no pushback and no hate from the Gulf Arabs. I get no pushback and no hate from the first world Muslims. None of that. It's only from the extremists. And the extremists are all living in Bradford. They're all living in the UK. It's really interesting that the most extreme points of view I get for the things I say about Islam are from England. It's never from the Islamic or the Arabic world. I saw another really interesting thing, actually. I'd like someone to find it. It was a post I saw on Twitter from a Pakistani guy. And he said, I'm from Pakistan. I live in Islamabad. And I was recently in Birmingham. And it felt more Islamic. And it was more backward thinking than anything you would see in Pakistan. He said, Islamabad is a far more liberal place to live than Birmingham, UK. He's saying the Pakistanis who are still in Islamabad are less Islamic and less extreme about things than those inside of Birmingham, UK. So you can have a conversation about all of these things. It's a long and detailed conversation. It'll get me in a lot of trouble. And as I'm only 2.5 years into Islam, I don't know all of the ins and outs. There's other people who know it better than me. What I will say is that I believe every country and every race, every identity has a right to their land. I believe that. I believe that the British people have a right to have an England for British people that feels like England. You can argue what a British person is. Perhaps the definition may be slightly changing, but you would argue that Great Britain has a Christian heritage. And I don't think there's anything wrong as a Muslim to say that Great Britain is a Christian country. It's always been a Christian country and it should remain a Christian country. I believe that. I like that they let me visit. That's fine. I would never go to the UAE and say this should be a Christian nation. I would never do that. So why do we do it the other way around? It just seems hypocritical.
But that's the point, though. That's the point what a lot of people are making. If you want to live in a place that majority is Muslim, go there. You can move there. If you want to live in a place that's got the traditions, let them stay there, right? That's the whole argument about nationalism. Like if you're proud of your country, no, you shouldn't be proud of your country.
No, but that only applies to white people. And I'm one of the champions of this, even though the hardcore race realist racists on Twitter hate me because they call me mulatto and mixed race and all these things. I don't care. I'm going to champion for it anyway. Only white people are not allowed to love themselves, love their race, and love their countries. Everyone else is. White people are the only ones who could do it. If anyone else flies a flag or says we're from wherever, or we're this color, or we're this religion, we want it, it's fine. When white people do it, it's instantly demonized. White people are the only people who are expected to give up their lands. And it's actually quite, and I say this as a half white man, half black man, it's very obvious. It's very obvious for me to see. And the European countries, you could argue that America was founded multiracially. You could argue that. But the British people are a type of people. They're an ethnicity. They're a type of people from one place and one part of the earth. And once they lose it, they have nowhere else to go. That's all they have. And they're being replaced in real time. And their leader, Keir Starmer, is letting it happen. And if you talk about it, you go to jail. All of this is happening right now. And unless the men do something and replace him with somebody who cares, they're going to be replaced. That's the bottom line of it. I can then argue, I can move on to the point that, we all get what we deserve in this life and that the strong destroy the weak. We could argue that point. I could sit here and say, well, white people, if you get replaced, you deserve it because you didn't do anything about it. I could make that argument, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. White people are being replaced in their host nations. That's obvious for me to see. I don't think anyone can argue against that point. People try.
But
people
that's also a fair argument, though.
No, it's a very fair argument, but that upsets people. Or they deny it's happening. But it is happening. White people are going extinct.
Yep.
You are going extinct. And then when you tell people this, they have lots of different answers to it. But nationalism is feared when white people band together. And then, you can argue, this actually ties back into something that's very interesting. The reason they fear nationalism when white people get banded together is because they apply it to World War II. They say, well, white nationalists do what Hitler did because he was a white nationalist. So they say that when white people get together and are nationalistic, it's like the Nazis. When other people get together and they're nationalistic, it's not. Is this actually true? Is this the largest psyop in history? I mean, World War II has had such a profound effect on our culture up until this point now. World War II is the basis for all good and bad in the entire world. If I say to you, name the worst person in history, you'll probably say Hitler. You won't say Stalin, who killed more because he was on our team.
Or Mao.
Or Mao, who killed more. Now, I'm not sitting here sticking up for Hitler. I'm just saying that World War II has shaped the modern world, and they use it as an emotional trigger to prevent white people from sticking up for themselves. Guess what I saw in the car on the way here? A terror attack in Germany. A car attack. You see it?
Yep, this morning.
A Muslim ran over a bunch of white people in Germany this morning. But the white people in Germany can't band together to fight against it because then they are what?
Racist.
Nazis.
Yep.
Nazis.
Yep, for sure.
So they use World War II. Let me ask you guys a question. If they use World War II to subvert white nationalism to the point of extinction, wouldn't it be truly treasonous if the story of World War II wasn't even true? What if there's another story to World War II? Is it true, the story that we know? The version of events that we know? Hitler's just crazy and he just lost.
All right, man, let's get right into it, man. So, look, man, he makes a couple, good points. I mean, one thing I want to point out that the reality of the migrant situation in the UK is not that there's an invasion of Muslims, quote unquote, because we all know how they like to lump, other groups of people and lump them all into one category. But the reality of it is around 40% of all live births in England and Wales had either one or both parents were non-UK born, and 35% of the parents were born outside of the UK, out of which 17,745 live births to women born in India, and that's almost a 16.3% increase from 15,260 in 2021. So if you check the numbers, it's the majority of the immigrants coming into the UK, right, were Indians. They were Indians. Indian births have increased 20% within 1 year in the United Kingdom, guys. This should show you. And Indians are the majority not Muslim. And, for the most part, they're not really involved in any violence throughout the world. It's mainly peace-loving folks that, come and they're very smart and, they do what they have to do. So the majority of the migrants that are coming into Europe are not from that particular group of people. And then they make the claim that, the name Muhammad is used as, it's the number one named, the number one name that is frequently used in the United Kingdom because there's a bunch of Muslims there, not knowing the fact that Muhammad, the word Muhammad in general, is used by a huge proportion of Muslims. You know, so and it's, I believe it's the most commonly used name in the world, if I'm not mistaken. I think it still is. It was at one point. So Muhammad is the most commonly used name in the entire world, and the majority of Muslims name themselves Muhammad or different variations of Muhammad. Right? So that whole claim was just, again, they're trying to push this narrative that the UK is the Tommy Robinson BS, that it's being invaded by a bunch of radical Muslims, and this is, let's be quite honest here, man. Most of these people that are coming to Europe from these third world nations are being they come from unstable countries that have had constant years of war and poverty and constant war, like no breaks within the last 20 years in Afghanistan, Iraq, these certain countries here, total instability, and the people in charge of these countries, right, are giving them a one-way ticket to any European nation they would like, right? And nobody's calling that out. Nobody's calling out that they are flooding. They're pretty much emptying the Muslim countries with some of the worst people you could possibly think of, right? Which is obviously the 2% of the entire Muslim, Muslim population, because there's 1.2 billion Muslims. They're taking 2% of the worst, most criminal Muslim people you can ever think of, and they're throwing them in these European countries. And then now they're surprised that there's a huge crime rate and there's all this crap that's going on and there's extremism. And you have then they put that one guy who was from the UAE, right? Which is, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, they are more responsible for this immigration crisis and the terrorism, or whatever he wants to call it, and the extremists, right, that are being emptied into these European countries, because they've rounded up all the extremist elements in their country, right? And that's why what's his name, the new crown prince, is so popular amongst the world the world leaders. You have Lindsey Graham and all these other people, and Trump and all these people, constantly speaking highly of him, is because the guy rounded up all the clerics, all the extremist Wahhabi clerics, and the people who were spreading that ideology, took them out, right, and imported them to Europe. Okay, by the permission of the European governments. So you're self-sabotaging your own countries, and then you want to run around and cry that your country's being invaded. Why don't you stand up to what's going on and stand up to stopping these wars and these instabilities? Why do these countries have to grab their shit and pretty much shit on your country? And then you guys, you want to make a big skeptical and propagandize extremist Muslims like that. There's this huge wave of crime and bullshit that's going on. And the fact of the matter is, this is the issue with this situation too, is like they're lumping a bunch of different groups together, right? He said the stabbing attacks, the violence, the stabbing attacks were coming from, individuals who were Christians from African nations, right? The grooming gangs that they're speaking of, that's something that you need to look into, because again, there's this huge lumping of Indians and Pakistanis and Africans and Muslims. They're lumping everyone together and they're blaming everything on Islam. You saw what happened with there was 3 months ago, a Rwandan Christian, right, stabbed some young girls. I don't know exactly what the situation. I believe he stabbed 2 or 3 girls or some crazy shit like that, right? And when they dropped the news, all the mainstream media outlets, from Fox News all the way to whatever they got going in the UK, all the way to X, all the way to the independent media agencies, they were like, Muslim man stabs 2 girls, and there was riots and outrage and all this other crap. Until people now, good thing the internet and independent media has really helped solve some of these issues early on, especially what we saw what happened with George Floyd and all these other events that occurred, where there was misinformation and all this lying and bullshit going on that caused people to go hysterical. now places like X or stuff like that, they're fact checking this shit. They pulled up information on his family, and it turned out the guy was a full-blown like Christian. Like he was came from a Christian culture from Rwanda, who I think don't even like Muslims, right? Because there's this whole tribal beef going on there. And they're trying to pin the shit on Muslims. Like, what the fuck is going on here? You know, and they got caught red-handed, luckily, you know. And then you have the other situation where you had the guy that rammed his car into, like, you know, a group of British people, and everybody was saying, oh shit, here it goes, another terrorist attack. This person's a Muslim, you know, this and that. This is an extremist ideology. Then they do their research, and this guy was an Islamophobe. Like, he's a guy who left his religion, and he was a full-blown Islamophobe. Didn't have anything to do with Islam, right? And even recently, you had like the terrorist attack that happened in New Orleans, and he had the ISIS flag. You know, we saw what happened there, and they contacted his sister and his mom. They did an interview with them, and they said the guy was never even raised a Muslim. He was a Christian. You know, but people play on the fact of, you know, people like to play on, they take everything face value, you know, and they play on stereotypes, and they automatically assume just because this type of attack resembles, you know, something that, you know, would for somehow, I don't know, Hollywood or something has trained them to believe that anything like this that happens is related to Islam. They automatically go for that. Right, and it's a complete brainwash. Saying that the car rammer was a Muslim and this and that, and then we do our research, and the motherfucker's not even furthest away from being a Muslim, right? It's food for thought, man. Let me know what you guys think in the comment sections down below, man. Like, comment, subscribe. You already know the deal.